Hello and welcome everyone. In today's chess video, let's have a look at 4 best attacking plan in the most common opening played, the Italian game. It starts with e4, black responds symmetrically with e5. We play a knight to f3 attacking the e5 pawn, knight c6 defending it. Bishop c4 gives an attack to the vulnerable f7 square. Here, black has two choices, either to go knight f6 or bishop c5. Doesn't matter with any of the move because more or less it leads to the same position. We are going to have a look at bishop c5. We play pawn c3 and the idea is to play pawn d4 in future. Black has multiple choices to play. Sometimes black play their pawn to h6 as they are worried about a knight coming on g5 and attacking the f7 square like a fried liver attack. So they played their pawn to h6. This is actually waste of time, but still it allows us to see an interesting line which is overlooked by many. Now the idea behind pawn c3 was not only to play the pawn to d4, but it also allows us to play pawn b4 and attack the bishop. So let's give an attack on the queen side, play the pawn to b4. The bishop goes back on the b6 square. Now we have multiple ways of doing it. We can go pawn a4 and a5 attack the bishop, or we can immediately strike by playing our pawn to b5 attacking the knight. The knight on c6 was protecting the pawn on e5. Now after we attack and he goes on the corner, look at this, both the pieces on the queen side, they are stuck and are in the corner. The knight goes to a5. We can start with a beautiful attack. Sacrifice the bishop, capture on the f7 square and give a check. The time king captures it, we can go knight e5 and give a check. The king cannot go to e7 or f8 because if he goes to f8, then knight g6 follows with a fork. Same happens with the king on e7 square. If the king goes back on the e8 square, then we have a beautiful attack with the queen. Queen coming on the h5 square, trying to give us scholar's mate checkmate. Here, if he plays his king to e7, then we can give a check by playing our bishop to a3. King has no choice but to come up on the e6 square. And now we finish off the game by a beautiful checkmate. And if he blocks the check here with his pawn, then still queen f7 is a beautiful checkmate. This was one attacking plan. What happens if he's not playing his pawn to h6? Rather, he chooses the right move and plays his knight to f6. After knight f6, trying to attack our e4 pawn, we do not directly go for pawn to d4, but we play this sneaky little move, pawn to d3, protecting it. Now here, black has again two choices. Either he can go with his pawn to d5 or he can go with his pawn to d6. First, let's have a look at the aggressive pawn d5. After pawn d5, we first capture it, he captures it back, and now we can simply play our queen to b3. Queen on b3 gives an attack to the knight twice. The knight cannot move, otherwise the pawn on the f7 will be lost. Here he has two choices. Either he can go back with his knight to e7 or he can go with his knight to a5. If he goes with knight a5 or e7 anything, queen b5 comes with a beautiful double attack, giving a check and winning the piece. If he blocks it with the bishop, then the bishop on the c8 square was earlier protecting the b7 pawn. Now the bishop is no longer on c8 and we can simply capture the pawn on b7. We are attacking this knight as well as the rook. The queen cannot come and support this knight because then the rook will be lost. So, and if he plays his knight to a5 or e7, follows with the same tactical idea, queen b5, give a check and win the piece. So now let's have a look at the third attacking plan. What happens after the move pawn d3 if he plays his pawn to d6? For d6, we have a sneaky little move, bishop to b3. Now bishop b3, we want to keep the bishop in the same diagonal as it is attacking the f7 square, and whenever later it is attacked, we can keep it protected or come back on the c2 square with our bishop. So bishop to b3. Here we wait for him to come either on the g4 square, which is most common idea for many players, to pin the knight. If he plays his bishop to g4, then we give an attack to the bishop, play our pawn to h3. If he captures the knight, then queen captures it back and we have a beautiful attack on the king side. But what if he is not capturing it and rather he is going back with his bishop on the h5 square? Then we can play our knight to d2. Now the idea behind knight d2 is to go knight f1 and knight g3, trying to attack over here and put some more pressure on the king side. We want to build our pieces, get our pieces on the opponent's king side so that we can give a beautiful attack. After knight d2, he castles and we can go with the same plan, knight f1. Here, if he plays his pawn to h6, trying to protect the g5 square so that the knight doesn't jump on the g5 square, we can go with the same plan, go knight g3, or we can march up our pawns by pushing it to g4. The bishop is under attack, he goes back, and we can further push our pawn to give an attack to the knight. The pawn captures it. We can capture it back with our bishop on the g5 square. Now this knight is pinned, and also you are pinning this pawn to the king. The further idea can be just push your pawns up and attack this bishop and open up the rook file. The rook is still on the home square but will be a useful piece in the attack. Here if he places queen to d7, unpinning the knight, we can go with our knight to g3, following the same plan. Next we can just capture this and weaken his king side. If he places knight to h5, because the knight is pinned now, he's playing it to h5, we can ignore it and we can just play our knight to h4, trying to attack this bishop. Now this bishop will be a free bishop because the pawn is pinned. If he captures our knight, we capture the bishop. He cannot capture it back, it is pinned. He captures our rook. Now we can simply go with our queen to h5 and this checkmate is inevitable. Now let's have a look at the fourth attacking plan. What if he's not going bishop g4, rather he's simply castling? So after he castle, we can castle. And what we do in the Italian game, we simply wait for him to come. Sooner or later, he is going to play his bishop to g4. The time he plays his bishop to g4, follow with the attack pawn to h3. He goes back on the h5 square and now we play the same move, knight bd2. The idea is to go knight f1 and knight g3. Okay. Here, if he plays a move like pawn d5, we ignore the threat. We want to move our knight to f1, but the rook is blocking its way. So first we'll move the rook and vacate the f1 square for a knight to come in. He captures our pawn, we can capture it back. Now, this queen is now attacking our queen indirectly if we go knight to f1. He places pawn to h6. We cannot immediately go knight f1, otherwise the queen will lose. A queen is an important piece if you want to give a checkmate. It acts as a very important piece. So we'll save our queen, we'll go with the queen to e2. He plays a move like queen to e7. Idea is to get the other rook in the game in the open file. We go with our plan, knight to f1, rook d8, and we go knight g3 attacking the bishop. The bishop has only way to go back is on g3 and we attack it further. Now after knight coming on the g3 square, we are attacking the bishop as well as we are aiming for the f5 square. The knight if goes on the f5 square will be very useful. So he went back on the g6 square. Remember, this pawn is pinned, so we take advantage of it and just play our knight to h4. The bishop has only choices to go back on the h7 square and then we go on the f5 square attacking the queen. Even if he trades off our piece, we are doing fine. Now the queen is in danger. He goes on the d7 square with his queen and we can jump in with the attack. Look at this bishop. Look at the other bishop. Both the pieces are aiming at the king side. We can simply play our bishop to h6. He captures and we can capture it back. We can sacrifice our piece for 2 pawns and a beautiful attack on the king side. Or we can simply get our pieces in the game first. So we can play our queen to f3. The next idea is to first is to give an attack in the f file and next is to play our queen g3 and give a checkmate on the g7 square. Here if he places knight to e7 trying to attack our f5 knight, we can go and sacrifice the knight, just play the knight to h6. This is not actually a sacrifice. If he captures with the g pawn, then we can capture his knight on the f6 square and we still have a beautiful attack. We won a pawn on g7 square. Next coming is bishop to h6. If he places knight to g6, that will be again a blunder because this pawn is pinned and you can simply capture the knight. So these were the 4 best attacking plans in the Italian game. Now these were from the white side. Stay tuned to learn what happens if your opponent does these plans on you. How will you respond as black? Stay tuned for more such videos. Till the time, please hit the like button and subscribe to our channel. Thank you.